BS-Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord. Homeopathy is BS. Complete and total bull malarkey, horse hockey, nonsense. Does nothing. Absolutely nothing. BS. Full stop. Everything I hate. BS. If you don't feel like watching this entire episode, let that be your takeaway. That is the too long didn't watch or too long didn't listen. Just go and know that homeopathy is nonsense and complete and total just baloney. I'm going to explain why. We're going to do a whole episode on it. But I want to be very clear from the beginning that this is where we're coming from. And I'm going to explain why. And I think you'll agree with me by the end, even if you just had a reaction right now. Because welcome to BS-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the usual, bullshit. I'm your host, Trey Dorn. It is August of 2024, and we're under a lot of stress. And I decided this month to tackle a topic that's been in my little folder of things I wanted to talk about on the show, but I've kind of put off for a while because I talk about a little an episode of Breeze podcast a long time ago, so it kind of got shuffled away. And I've talked about this on my TikTok. I've talked about this in other mediums, but I really wanted to dedicate a whole episode of this show to talk about exactly why homeopathy itself is bullshit. And I'm going to pronounce it both homeopathy and homeopathy in this episode. Both pronunciations are correct. I just am bad about being consistent about it. There are words I may mispronounce later on, but I have done my best to make sure that I've got them correct. But to be fair, I have only ever read a lot of these words. So, anyways. Yeah, and before we get started, when I did a bunch of videos of this on TikTok like 2 years ago, I think, I got a lot of pushback from people who didn't understand what we were talking about. We're talking about specifically in this episode homeopathy. Homeopathy is not to be confused with herbalism. Herbalism is very different. Herbalism is actually taking chemicals from herbs and putting them in your body or applying them to your body, doing things. Like you are actually taking a chemical effect and doing a thing. That is not homeopathy. It is in many ways the opposite of homeopathy. But alternative medicine sellers have tried to conflate the terms a lot and will categorize things under different things. So I'm going to, in this episode, explain to you fully what homeopathy is. I'm going to give you the history. And by the end of it, if you were taken aback at my saying that it didn't work, by the end of this episode, you will understand where I'm coming from at the very least. Because, there are many things in this world that I don't believe in, but I'm not going to address on this show, right? There are even forms of alternative medicine that I don't believe work, that I will probably never address on this show. Homeopathy is bad, though. People will take homeopathic cures or treatments in lieu of a real medical treatment. And that's how people end up getting hurt. And that's always where I draw my line with things is someone going to get hurt? So, yeah. And again, I'm just going to say this again. I said it before. Homeopathy is not herbalism. Herbalism is like the foundation of modern pharmaceuticals. I'm holding up a bottle of aspirin for the listeners. I'll give it a little shake. This is different. Herbalism is different. Let's talk about what homeopathy is. Homeopathy is not ancient. This is not some long-standing tradition. We're looking at the turn of the 18th to 19th century is when it's invented. That's how recent it is. It's if New York City is newer than your thing, it's not ancient. I think that's a fair statement. So yeah, we're going to go start with the history of it. I'm going to break down a little bit what it is, and then I'm going to talk about why it's bullshit. And hopefully then I'll have a funny story for you at the end. But I think you're going to come through this journey with me and agree. So let's start out with the history. The history of homeopathy. Homeopathy starts with a man named Samuel Hahnemann. Born Christian Frederick Samuel Hahnemann in April of 1755. Hahnemann grew up near Dresden in Germany. He's German. He studied medicine in Leipzig and later Vienna, and then finally transferred to and graduating with honors from the University of Erlangen in 1779. So he left Leipzig for Vienna because there wasn't enough practical work being done in Leipzig. So he went to Vienna, and then the only reason he really transferred from Vienna to Erlangen is mostly because of money. It was cheaper to go to med school there. This is not a criticism. That's just sort of a history. And now I want to make it clear, while Hahnemann was a doctor, European medicine was still largely functioning on the miasma theory of disease at the time. While germ theory had been proposed and it's understood to be a thing that exists by certain people, it's not popular. This is not the common belief in the medical world. That germ theory at this point is fringe and weird. And frankly doesn't really become commonly accepted until the end of the 19th century. So that context needs to be understood in this whole story, because again, he's a doctor. Hahnemann is a doctor, but he's coming from this world where the understanding of medicine is very, very limited. And so while I believe he's wrong, I believe that he was coming from a place of trying to be right with the best information he had. So let's just keep that in mind. And miasma theory, for those of you who don't know, it's the idea that disease is spread by bad air or night air emanating from rotting organic matter. That's kind of the general idea. Yeah, night air. Night air. Night Air is the name of my Jefferson Starship cover band. Anyways. So that context has to be understood when we're talking about what influences his ideas, what influences where he's coming from. Hahnemann rejected a lot of the medical wisdom at the time because he saw it as ineffective and harmful. And that's largely because it was. I think a lot of the reasons why, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, a lot of the reasons why homeopathy, from his point of view, was probably appeared to be more effective is because he wasn't doing all the bad stuff that the common medicine was telling him to do. So just because he's not just because he saw that the common medical wisdom at the time was bad and wrong doesn't mean that the ideas he came up with to replace it were correct. So Hahnemann was translating a medical treatise by William Cullen into German, because again, Hahnemann's a German. In that treatise, Cullen put forward the idea that, I'm probably going to say this wrong, cinchona cured malaria because it was bitter. Cinchona or cinchona, it's a plant. It's a plant. And yeah, it's Cullen believed it cured malaria. It could treat malaria because it was bitter. This is a ludicrous idea. And Hahnemann was really skeptical of the bitterness being the reason. It seemed like nonsense to him, because it was nonsense. We know that the plant works because it contains quinine, which can kill the parasite that causes malaria. It's no longer the first preferred treatment anymore, only because it has side effects, and there are other things that we can treat malaria with now. But that's why. It's because of the quinine. Nothing to do with the taste or whatever. But again, people don't know this because They don't even know that there's a blood parasite with malaria. So, all right, that's not something people knew. So, anyways, so Hahnemann had his own ideas about why cinchona or cinchona. I'm gonna call it cinchona. I might be wrong. I'm not an herbalist, and I have only ever read the word. So cinchona is what I'm going with, and you can tell me how wrong I am in the comments section on the YouTube version, or email me. All right. So Hahnemann decided to test out his own idea. He took some cinchona himself, just to like try it out. He did not have malaria. He just took it. And according to Hahnemann, he experienced a number of side effects, including fever, joint pain, and shivering, which are symptoms that malaria causes. And Hahnemann came to the conclusion that it was effective as a treatment because it caused the same symptoms as the disease it was meant to treat. That was his wild idea. And he called this idea that you treat things with similar effects homeopathy. From the Greek homoios, homoios meaning like, and pathos meaning suffering. So homeopathy. And he referred to this as the law of similars. The law of similars. Of course, if you're trying to cure something with something that could cause the same results, you're not going to get a lot of takers. And, you know, if the cure can kill you as well as the disease, it's hard to sell. And that's where the other half of homeopathy comes in. Arguably the more important part, and that we're going to talk about at length later. And that is, Hahnemann was like, okay, if this is going to hurt you to take the stuff, maybe it's more effective if it's a lower dose. Let's do the lowest possible dosage. And then he comes to this conclusion of extreme dilutions of the substance of treatment. And I think the quote is, the spirit-like medicinal powers of the crude substances. Hahnemann believed that the more diluted something was, the more effective it was in treatment. And again, we're going to come back to that. So that's what homeopathy is, though. It's this idea that you treat something with something that causes the same kind of symptoms, and that you do it by like these extreme dilutions. So that's what he comes to in like the late 1700s. In 1810, he publishes the Organon of the Healing Art, though it was retitled the Organon of Medicine, starting with the second edition. In this book, he introduces the idea of miasms as the infectious principles underlying diseases. Because again, germ theory, not a popular idea yet, barely known to anybody. All right. Each of these miasms was associated with a specific disease, and there's just three of them. There's just three of them. There's psora, or itching, syphilis, and psychosis, not to be confused with like psychosis, but Sycosis. It's like inflammation of like hairs, if you look it up. The most important of these three, though, and yes, syphilis was in there. The most important of these three was psora, which is just like all itching. This is the big focus of his thing. Like, so many things go back to psora as the cause, and he blames it for everything from like cancer to epilepsy to deafness. Almost so many things go back to itching spreading them. There are obvious flaws in this that you can see, that I hope you can see them. So these ideas get really popular in the 19th century, and for good reason. Like during the cholera outbreaks, patients often recovered better while getting treated by a homeopath than by getting treated by like regular medicine at the time. by conventional medicine. This is because the conventional medicine at the time was actively making things worse. So the treatments people were receiving during these outbreaks from conventional doctors were actually making the outbreaks worse. So, of course, the people who were getting the homeopathic treatment recovered at a higher rate, survived better, all of these things, because I don't know if you know this, but it's more effective to do nothing than to actively poison someone. So the homeopathy was doing nothing. Let me be clear. It was doing nothing. But sometimes doing nothing and resting is better than actively doing things that hurt you. But this makes homeopathy look so much more effective than it is. And so by the year 1900, homeopathy is huge, which, at least according to Wikipedia, in the United States alone, there were like 22 colleges and over 15,000 homeopathic practitioners. That's just in the U.S. But this doesn't last, because if you notice, I said 1900. Germ theory is catching on. It is here. It has become the medically accepted thing, and understanding germ theory is way more effective than any of the stuff we've been doing in medicine before this. So people start to, right, even though it's at its height, like 1900, it's at its height, it's about to come crashing off a cliff. Because with the rising understanding of germ theory and vocal critics pulling apart the foundations of homeopathy, it's all but dead by 1920. It's just like nothing. But that's the end of that's not the end of the story, right? Like, that's not, obviously I'm here talking about it with you. So that's not the end of it. Now, there are some like random blips in the middle. Like, not everyone's abandoned it. Like, Royal Copeland, a senator from New York and a homeopathic physician himself, included homeopathic remedies in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938. But like, by the time you get to 1950, there are fewer than 100 homeopathic doctors in the United States versus the 15,000 that were there, half a century earlier. So you think this would be the end of the story, except the 1970s happen and a little thing called the New Age movement. And the New Age movement's looking for like every kind of alternative medicine it can, man. We are looking for anything. Vibes-based, even better. And because they're looking at stuff regardless of the science. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the New Age movement didn't do good research, and people who are selling alternative medicines are looking for inexpensive ways to expand what they're doing. Little thing on that. And they start conflating it with herbalism in the marketing and all of this stuff. So this is the world we enter into with the New Age movement pumping up homeopathy, and it gets press and like, oh, and this is where I tell you why it's nonsense. So, let's talk about those extreme delusions. Look, I could talk to you about like the diagnostic methods of homeopaths. I could talk to you about like more about the miasms, which are controversial within homeopathy. But let's talk about how homeopathy treats things. Because as I said before, extreme delusions is the primary way. There's technically a few other ways that homeopathy can like treat someone, but the primary one are the solutions, which when I say extreme delusions, you have to understand that what they do, this is the basic idea. This is the simple version. So you take this material that's supposed to cause a like symptom, right? Because law of similars, right? So whatever item for whatever you're treating, it would cause a similar effect as the harm that the person's experiencing. So you add some of that material into a solution, usually of water, sometimes of water and alcohol, sometimes of alcohol, but usually water. And then you start serial dilution. And you dilute it more, 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 until you get to the factor in which it is diluted. Statistically, in parts per million, there is not a single molecule of that introduced substance in the water left. Because while, like, we have this intuitive thought that, like, liquid can be infinitely, like, diluted or split up, we are always at a wall with the law of physics with atoms and molecules, right? If we're dealing with a pure element, just atoms. If we're dealing with something that's a compound or something like that, we're dealing with, something that's a combination of elements. We're dealing with the molecule, right? Like the last molecule to be that thing. Like, I can only divide this piece of cardboard up into cardboard so small before it stops being cardboard and just starts being carbon. And then it stops being carbon and starts being protons and neutrons and electrons. And then stops being even those and starts being quarks. Like, it stops being the thing at a certain point. So that's an important part of this that you have to remember. So when they go to the level of dilution that is standard with homeopathic cures, going back all the way to Hahnemann, statistically, there is zero material left in the carrier, in the water. Now, people are going to talk about, like, water having memory and all of that, and that is not a real thing. Not a real thing. And I think we have to remember that. So when I talk about homeopathy being nothing, I mean, it's literally nothing. You are drinking water. You are taking a sugar pill. Whatever the carrier that we are using in that cure, that is all you are consuming, theoretically. Now, there is a problem with homeopathic cures also having real active ingredients in them that have nothing to do with anything. And that's where we get into a little bit of fun. Homeopathic cures being in pharmacies and in stores marketed as real medicine is a genuine problem, but sometimes it's also funny. About 9 years ago, so I think 2015, CVS had a problem. CVS was selling a homeopathic laxative. Now, CVS started to notice that teenagers were buying a lot of this laxative. Just buying it in droves, because each one of these is only about an ounce. But they kept buying, like, teenagers would come into the store and buy this homeopathic laxative. I said earlier that sometimes it's alcohol, right? This laxative was largely just a solution of water and alcohol. And so what teenagers were doing were buying a bunch of them and getting drunk. They were literally just buying alcohol. And if your question was, did this work as a laxative? Actually, no, not really. People who have tried it, like, didn't work that well as a laxative. But it sure worked well at getting 16-year-olds drunk. And so they had to actually, like, pull it off the shelves. Because, again, the primary customer was teenagers getting drunk. Because while it did not work at all as a laxative, as its intended effect, it sure did work well as alcohol. And that's really, like, the risks of homeopathy are that, one, what's in it is not really what's in it. There's something else in it, like, say, alcohol, that can have an effect, right? Like, What if an alcoholic took this as a laxative? Things sometimes are in there that aren't supposed to be, which is a general problem with like a lot of the supplement industry too, and all that. But that's a whole other ball of wax. But secondly, people will be taking this as medicine instead of taking like a laxative. If they really are in a medical situation where they need a laxative, taking this instead of a real laxative could be bad. At best, all you're getting with homeopathic cures is the placebo effect. And while the placebo effect is fucking great, don't get me wrong, big fan of the placebo effect. Sometimes that's what it takes to get you through the day. People are taking these treatments instead of real medicine because they think it's going to work because it's marketed to them as real medicine. And pharmacies are carrying these homeopathic cures right alongside real medicine. And it's nothing. It is literally nothing. And when you push back against it, people will say, oh, well, herbalism, blah, blah. It's not herbalism. It's a different thing. A German scientist at the turn of the 18th and 19th century came up with a weird idea that just wasn't worse than the weird stuff we were doing in medicine, but it wasn't right either. Came up with an idea, it got really popular, and then it properly died out when medical and scientific studies came to better, more accurate conclusions, and then a bunch of people in the New Age movement dug up its grave, hauled it out, and said, hey, we're going to do this thing now. And largely, I think it's popular because it's easy to sell and market, because I don't know if you know this, but the cost to entry of putting water in something or shipping you a sugar pill is pretty cheap at cost. The New Age movement plus capitalism equals homeopathy ruining lives. Can you get why I came in hot on this topic at the beginning of the episode? Homeopathy, and I know you're saying, like, Trey, this is New Age bullshit, but is this witchcraft? This is a witchcraft show. But the fact is that so many of us walk and move through New Age circles. We do. There is so much overlap between the New Age movement and the modern witchcraft movement that 90% of the people are the same fucking people. Like, go to any witch event with Gen Xers and older, and you will find out some stuff. I know I have a younger audience. I know that, like, the millennial and Gen Z witches who listen and watch this show largely are not necessarily the people. But the fact is, you're going to go into these events, and some guy is going to try to pitch you on this, and they are going to make it confusing. And there is a chance, there was always a chance you might buy in, because they are practiced in sounding like they know what they're doing. And the people who practice this stuff, I believe that they believe it. But the truth is, we've left these ideas behind. We have a better understanding of medical science than Hahnemann did. I really hope I've been saying his name right this whole episode. I did not research the pronunciation. Anyways, Hahnemann, German. We have a better understanding now than what we did when he came up with this idea. He was living in a medical world with bad ideas that didn't work, and he tried to come up with something better, and he was wrong. And it's okay that he was wrong if we leave it in the past, right? Like, we live, we learn, we advance, we move forward. There is a Tim Minchin quote of, what do we call alternative medicine that works? Medicine. And now I know what you're saying. I know that someone has put this together in their head. Not everybody listening has put this together, but some of you have. And that is, hey, Trey, why is this different from witchcraft? How is it different? This extreme delusion different than sympathetic magic and a spell, infusing the energy into the stuff. And I hear you. I kind of get where you're coming from. But I counter that with the same thing that I said in an episode of Bree's podcast a long time ago, in her science denial episode, that like we always use the best magics first, right? And the best magics we have are fucking medicine. I'm a diabetic, man. I am alive because of pills that I take. Vibes are not going to deal with my diabetes. Vibes are not going to do it. And I think fundamentally we know this, and that's why like even people who want to use witchcraft to address real things use things like herbalism, which involves introducing real chemicals into the body. It's based off the same principles as regular pharmaceuticals. And which is, again, if you are taking any herbs, please inform your doctor and make sure they are aware of everything you're on. I do not care. It is very important that your doctor be aware. And if you do not have it, my audience doesn't have doctors. You guys don't have health insurance. Oh, God, the world's a terrible, terrible place. Whew. Anyways, homeopathy ain't it. Ain't gonna do shit. Ain't gonna do nothing. At best, it's a shitty spell put together by someone else, and so you may as well do it yourself for nothing. Your moon water is a more effective medical treatment than a homeopathic cure you buy at CVS. Because your homeopathic cure was put together by guys in a factory who weren't actually doing the spell like you did with your moon water. If you want vibes, there's plenty of ways to get vibes, but most of all, use real medicine. Talk to a doctor. Get vaccinated. If you have a medical emergency, go to urgent care at the very least. Don't go to a homeopath. Don't go to a homeopath. If you listen to me, again, here's another thing. If you listen to anything in this episode, may one of those things be that if you're in a situation, go to the ER or urgent care, don't go to a homeopath. Just don't ever go to a homeopath. God damn it. So that's where we are. Sorry if I got a little manic here at the end. Homeopathy. You're, in theory, treating things with like substances, which wouldn't work. But the good news is that you're using none of it in reality, so you won't make it worse. You'll just be wasting your money and your time and possibly not taking something legitimate that could actually help your situation. Homeopathy is bullshit. Homeopathy is bullshit. And I think that's where we're going to wrap it for this episode. I want to thank my lovely Patreon patrons for supporting this show. This episode wouldn't be here without you guys. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/TRAEGORN. That's my Patreon. I post about a bunch of stuff there, but one of the things Patreon does is support the show directly. I want to give out shout out level of Lindsay Dosey, Bruce Norville, Courtney, Claire Dennis, Caleb Bukowski, and Pamela Stariak. Supporting at just $1 a month will get you access to these episodes a week early. There's also a couple other benefits. First off, even people at the $1 level get a free ebook version of the Super Awesome Action Heroes role-playing game system. That's not witchcraft related. That's nerd related, but that's just an extra bonus. People at higher levels, though, like the shout-out level, also get access to ebooks of effectively eventually all of my books as I slowly release them in ebook form on that platform, including The Witch and the Rose, which is... So people at the $10 Patreon level just already have a copy of that ebook. They don't have to go out and buy my novel separately. They can just go get it. And in September, the sequel Bloody Damn Right will show up in Patreon for those members too. So, but if you, just $1 a month will get you these episodes a whole week earlier. I understand if you can't support the show that way, but if not, please just spread the show on social media. Tell your friends, tell your friends' friends, tell the people you don't like. Make them listen to it. If you find someone who is into homeopathy, give them this episode and force them to watch it and watch their face turn red as they disagree with everything I say and don't actually listen to me providing cogent historical facts. World's depressing. Anyways, remember, you can always follow me on social media. You can find me personally at tradorn.com. You can follow me on Twitter /X, kind of, at TRAEGORN. All those tweets are automated, but I do check my mentions. My primary social network is Tumblr and will probably always be Tumblr until Tumblr dies. And that you can find me there at TRAEGORN.tumblr.com. If you want to follow the show on Facebook, it is facebook.com/BSFreeWitchcraft. Please don't try to find my personal Facebook page. And you can find subscription links to everything at bsfreewitchcraft.com. And you can also subscribe to this on YouTube. If you're watching there is a video version for those of you who listen to the audio version. There is a video version of the show where you can see me kind of lose my mind in real time as I do these in only like 1 or 2 takes. I'll tell you, the show was easier to make when I did audio only because I could like combine like 6 takes together. Like sometimes a sentence would be like from 3 different takes and you couldn't tell because it was just audio, and I'm very good at audio editing, but I can't do that in video because it would be like really like obvious jump cuts. Anyways, remember, we're part of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. For more podcasts from actual play to true crime to witchcraft, you can go there. Remember, Hex Positive by Brina Guerin, nerdandtie.com/hex. You want to listen to a fun actual play show? Listen to Stormwood and Associates at nerdandtie.com/stormwood. There's neat stuff there, and you should listen to it. Let's Be Legendary is a 5th edition actual play show with an all-queer cast. Those people are great, and you should listen to that show if you want to listen to that kind of show. All that stuff's available at nerdandtie.com. Remember, I've got a webcomic called Peregrine Lake, peregrine-lake.com. Updates every Tuesday. It's a fun thing that exists. And with that, magicians, my exhausted ass is going to probably go get on an exercise bike for like 30 minutes because it's late and I need to do that to get tired enough to fall asleep. And that's where we're ending the show. So remember, dirt in our fingernails, brick in our hands. I will talk to you, magicians, next month. Probably. I don't know what's going on. Yes, obviously, I'll be back next month. Sorry, I'm bad at ending the show tonight. Bye-bye.